Hello, this presentation is all about Antonio, as you can see, and Antonio is the merchant in The Merchant of Venice. But I want you to be thinking, is he the main character? Think about just how much he's involved in the play, where and when he appears. You can use the quotations that I'm about to talk about money, to talk about relationships, friendship, love, religion, and an interesting one, which is his acceptance of fate and destiny. He just accepts what's about to happen to him. He doesn't tend to battle very much and fight for what he believes in. You can link this first quotation to something that Portia says. She uses the word forsooth or sooth, which just means truth, in truth. And here Antonio says, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad. Notice the so sad, it intensifies it. So in other words, these are our first words we hear from this person, and it kind of sets the tone for this man, that there's something deep inside him that just won't settle, that makes him unhappy. Graziano questions Antonio about his misery, his unhappiness, and Antonio replies with, I hold the world but as the world, Graziano, a stage where every man must play a part. Mine is a sad one. Now Shakespeare was really interested in this idea of theatre as representing everything that could go on in the world. If you think about the name of his theatre, it was called the Globe Theatre, and there is another reference where he says all the world's a stage in a different play. So here we're talking about the idea that you get given a part, and I think Antonio has accepted that there's nothing he can do about it. The part he's been given is that he has to play a sad person. This next quotation is an example of Antonio's generosity. Here he's using a triple, the rule of three, to explain to Bassanio that he can have whatever he wants. He says, my purse, meaning his money, my person, anything I can do to help, and my extremist means, don't even think about it, whatever it is, I will help. So my extremist means lie all unlocked to your occasions. So he's basically saying you can have whatever you want, Bassanio. Now, of course, the problem for Antonio and for Bassanio is that his fortunes are at sea, as he says in this quote, thou knowest my fortunes are all at sea. That means all the money that he has or could have or will make is all tied up in the ships that are sailing, filled with his possessions that he is attempting to sell in countries abroad. And therefore he doesn't actually have any money that he can give to Bassanio, which is of course why they need to seek it elsewhere. This next quotation is spoken by Shylock, as you can see his name's in brackets, and he says to Antonio, Signor Antonio, perfectly polite, many a time and often, in the Rialto you have rated me about my monies. This is the idea that Antonio has often abused, shouted, argued with Shylock, because Shylock, of course, charges interest on the money that he lends to people. And so Shylock is just reminding him of the times he's been cruel, unkind in the Rialto. Once again we have Shylock speaking, and he says, you call me misbeliever. When he says you, he means Antonio, but he kind of means most Christians who he comes into contact with in Venice. But here, if we think about Antonio speaking these lines, it's helpful. You call me misbeliever, cutthroat dog, and spit upon my Jewish gabardine. That, of course, is his cloak, one of the symbols of his Jewishness, what he's wearing. So he's really talking about the way that they've abused him. Misbeliever, of course, meaning that you're just wearing, that you are the wrong religion. You don't believe in the right religion, or you don't practice religion in the correct way. The cutthroat dog, because of the way that he does business, I guess. And this idea of a dog just keeps working its way through the play. Shylock as a dog just continues as an idea right the way through. This next quotation is an example of Antonio's honesty. Even though Shylock has kind of accused him of these things, Antonio believes that what he says is true and is right. So he says, I am like to call thee so again. So all the things that Antonio has called him or done, he says he's going to do again. It will happen again because this is what I believe. It doesn't stop him, even though he wants something from Shylock, he wants money. It doesn't stop him being honest and saying that the way I treat you will probably happen again. Antonio is confident that he will easily be able to pay back Shylock the money, the 3,000 ducats that they're going to borrow. Bassanio is not so sure, and Bassanio is a little bit worried about the terms of the deal. But Antonio is confident, which is why he says, "Why, fear not, man," he's talking to Bassanio, "I will not forfeit it." In other words, I will not fail. We know different, of course, because we've all studied the play, but he has this confidence at the beginning, and he needs it, of course, because that's what keeps the play going. That's why he takes the deal, and that's why he seals the bond. This next quotation, "Hie thee, gentle Jew, the Hebrew will turn Christian, he grows kind," is actually an example of something foreshadowing later events, because, of course, by the end of the play, the Hebrew, the Jew, Shylock, is in fact made to turn Christian by something that Antonio does. But here it's towards the beginning of the play, of course, and he's actually just referring to the fact that Shylock has agreed to do business with them, and so he's kind of pointing that out. Gentle Jew, you know, this idea that there is a kindness within. He's growing kind. Now we jump forward with this next quotation because it's already gone wrong for Antonio. His ships have apparently all sunk, all of his fortunes are lost, and the time that he was supposed to pay back Shylock his 3,000 ducats is gone and past, which is why he's thrown into prison with a jailer. He tries, because he has some influence, to speak to Shylock about what he needs to say, and he says, "I pray thee, hear me speak." Now we know that Shylock will not listen to him. "I will have my bond," he says. He's not interested in a conversation. Notice what he says, "I pray thee." That's a plea. He's pleading, he's begging. All he wants to do is to speak, but notice that little dash at the end. That's not me adding that. That's Shakespeare's dash. It's because he's interrupted. He doesn't get the chance to speak. Shylock is not interested. And so as a consequence of giving up, really, Antonio realizes that his pleas are pointless, his bootless prayers, pointlessness. Okay, he says, "I follow him no more with bootless prayers." He gives up. He realizes that he might as well talk to a stone, that Shylock is not interested in bargaining or talking or delaying in any way. So this is an example of Antonio, and this is a good word to use. He's fatalistic. He's decided that he's just going to have to accept what happens next. We jump to the courtroom, and a similar theme to the last quotation. Antonio says, "Let me have judgment and the Jew his will." Another example of him being fatalistic. He just wants his sentence. He knows there's nothing he can do, and you can see that he says that Shylock should get what he needs, wants, deserves, the Jew his will. So here he's being fatalistic yet again. In this next quotation, Antonio feels shame. There are a couple of examples of it in this very short quotation. He says, "I am a tainted wether of the flock." Tainted means damaged in some way, maybe the wrong colour on your wool, because a wether is a sheep. It's a male sheep, but it's not any old male sheep. It's a castrated male sheep. So he doesn't feel like a man, and he also feels not only does he not feel like a man, he also feels that there's something wrong with him in some way because he's tainted. So the key words here are tainted, and of course he's comparing himself to a sheep. So we've got the wolf or the dog in Shylock, and now we have the sheep that's going to be savaged by the wolf. Here we have Antonio accepting what's about to happen. He tells Bassanio, "I am armed and well prepared." He doesn't mean armed with a weapon, he means that he's prepared mentally. He says, "For if the Jew do cut but deep enough, I'll pay it instantly with my heart." So he knows that what's about to happen is that he's about to die because of what Shylock is going to do. So he's accepted this. This is another example of him accepting fate. He knows that his destiny is to be here in this scene. We know that Portia works her magic and Antonio is freed. And then we know that Portia, as Balthazar, requests that Bassanio give her a ring as payment. Now it is interesting, I think, that the person who convinces Bassanio to hand over the ring is not Portia, but it's Antonio. Antonio says, "My lord Bassanio." Notice that slightly elevated status now, because Bassanio is rich, wealthy, powerful because he's married to Portia, or is linked to Portia. Let him have the ring. Okay, that idea that he's handing it over. Now, you could even argue that Antonio's being a little bit devious here, a little bit mischievous to cause a bit of trouble, or he may just be very grateful to this person who's rescued him, and he thinks that a ring is the least this person should receive for saving his life, basically. This final quotation is about Bassanio, as you can see in brackets. He doesn't say that out loud, that's just what I've added. He says to Portia, "My soul upon the forfeit that your lord will never more break faith advisedly." So here we all are in Belmont, everybody's happy, and Antonio is just reassuring Portia that Bassanio will never again ever let her down or break any of his promises. Notice we have Antonio basically setting up another bond. It's a bargain. He says that he will give his soul if Bassanio ever lets Portia down or breaks a promise.